Check, check, check. What's going on, guys? This is Paul Smith over at 12 Rivers Realty doing our 12 at 12, but today really at 11. I got some shit going on today with a potential builder with a 70 unit project that I'm going to be working on. And so I got to go meet them at 12. So yes, we're coming on a little early, but you know what? We're going to talk about some good shit today. And for anybody that needs to hear this, man, just know that the end of the day, just work your ass off. And thought about this morning. When things are going really well in the economy and everything else in the world, people start to think about, take time off, all this other stuff. When things are bad, that's when you got to grind. And right now is a grind time. Get to that point where you're comfortable again, and then go take a vacation. But know when it's time to grind and when it's time to play. And that's an important thing. And I'll tell you what, I played a lot over the past 5 years. I gotta lie. And you know what? It's time to grind. So let's start grinding. Nikki, what's up? Yeah, I hope you're well. I hope the family's well. Hope Aaron's well. Been a long time. Shout out to my folks from New Hampshire, by the way. Got Clarissa in the house. We got Jen in the house as well. We're just talking about. I had lunch with a good friend of mine on Thursday. That's an economist, and we were talking about a bunch of stuff, and talking about the Chips Act and whether that was a success or a failure, and talking about Nvidia, talking about Intel, and talking about the different sanctions and different things that are happening, kind of at a federal level, and what that means for Austin, and what that also means for other cities and states that are very technology kind of dependent. And if you think about it, like the federal government said, no more selling chips to China. Well, China was 40% or is 40% of the overall global chips market. That means that we're going to take a pretty big hit. Nvidia took a pretty big hit on their earnings report that came out last week, and that's part of that. And what does that mean for Austin? Well, that potentially means that we could take a hit as well, especially being that we are so dependent on chip manufacturing and other things like that. So it'll be interesting to see how kind of the global trade policy uh, pans out, and then also what does that mean for us in Austin? What does that mean for your states like Ohio that is starting to have like a fledgling tech business, also having a lot of data centers being built out and whatnot. Other thing we're going to talk about today is a new investment strategy that I didn't even think about until I got a call yesterday. And one of my investors happens to be the economist that I know. Says, he wants to lease out this property in a certain part of town. I get a call from an agent that says I'm repping this corporation. They want to lease the property for 4 months. They want it to be fully furnished, similar to an Airbnb. However, they're going to pay the equivalent of your whole year's worth of rent in a matter of 12 or matter of 4 months. So instead of getting 1,700 a month, he's going to get 6,300 a month over the next 4 months, which is great. That means that in theory, if that tenant continues to extend, it's a corporate tenant. If that tenant continues to extend, he will 4x his rental rates, which is huge. If you think about that as far as a cash flow perspective, if you think about that as far as a cap rate perspective, it doesn't necessarily mean that the rate of the property or the value of the property goes 4x. But if it's something that's consistent and something that's going to happen, say, over the next few years, I would expect rent in that specific pocket, but also prices in that specific pocket to skyrocket. And this isn't something that is widely known throughout the market yet. So if this is something that you guys would be interested in learning more about, hit me up. Again, as I walked the property, I was like, damn, this really makes sense. And I'm mad I didn't think about it, but all good. Will, what's up, man? Thanks for jumping in here. Hope all is well. Guys, again, my name is Paul Smith with 12 Rivers Realty. This is the 12 at 12, but really at 11 today because I got some stuff going on. This is an AMA. So if you guys want to ask me anything about about business, ask me anything about real estate, ask me anything about what my favorite fish is for sushi. Pure ate a lot of it. You let me know. By the way, my favorite fish is otoro, for sure. Clarissa asks, what's the rainy property going up? I think what she's talking about is uh is the Rainy Street property that's going up, and it's called the Paseo. There's a bunch of properties going up in Rainy. Obviously, I think at this point we're on Rainy Street 4.0. Those that know anything about Rainy Street, or those that don't know anything about Rainy Street, Rainy Street is located in the southeast quadrant of downtown in what's called the Central Business District. And so I would say early 2000s, they rezoned Rainy to be buildings as tall as you want to go, right? So the water line is over 1,000 feet tall. That's going to be the tallest building in Austin, tallest building this side of the Mississippi. And it's going to be residential. You're going to have a one hotel, you're going to have office, you're going to have condos. So it's going to be the first of its kind that have all three asset types: office, hotel, and residential. And it, I mean, it's going to be a dope building. It really kind of sets the downtown market up as as a staple. Once you start to get those very high skyscrapers, and we'll see kind of what comes next, or if that is just the tallest building that ever gets built in Austin, or if there's going to be something else there. So we'll see. And then you have the modern. Shout out to Kevin Burns for delivering that. Um, that's going to be that's going to be residential. Um, and then you have Paseo, which is the next one to deliver. And so, but that's going to be the last one to deliver for a good amount of time. There's no new, after Paseo delivers, residential buildings that are going to deliver in the downtown market. And that's important to know, because obviously when it comes to rental rates and it comes to markets and everything else, supply and demand is very, very important. And as you continue to add more inventory, what's up, Victor? Hope all is well. Thanks for jumping in here. As you continue to add more inventory, um, and also when you have not as many people living in downtown, because there's still a COVID-esque kind of hangover with employers having people live downtown, although there is a push to have everybody move back downtown or move closer to the office space. Still not everybody's in there yet. So you have that like worst of worst case worlds if you're a residential developer, best of best case worlds if you are looking to move into the downtown market. Right now, a downtown rental is going to be the best price that you're going to see for a while, I believe. Because after Paseo delivers, let's say that's a 6 month to 1 year process of normalizing or stabilizing. That means that it's leasing out. After that, so let's say 12 months from now, you're going to have a decent amount of time where there's not going to be any delivery of inventory. And so typically once supply and demand starts to come back to equilibrium, or supply and demand starts to shift the other way, which is more tenants than there are rentals, then you'll start to see prices start to creep up incrementally. Where you start to see it creep up in a hyper rental rate would be in a situation in which where, let's say they don't deliver anymore for the next few years, and then you have a large influx of people moving downtown. Amberly, I hope all's well. I was just talking about my favorite fish. Actually, I went with a toro. Would love to know what yours is. Amberly's a dope sushi chef, by the way. Shout out. And so there was a time in 2008 where there was a time in 2008 where Austin market was getting hit pretty hard, and the reason why it was getting hit hard is because the financial crisis just happened in 2007, 2008. So it was pretty impossible for people to get loans at that point. And at the same time, Austin was just becoming the hot spot as far as for people to move. And that's where you really started to see hyper growth. But from 2008 to 2009, and from 2009 to 2010, we had 20% increases in rental rates year over year. And the reason for that was because they weren't adding more inventory. I think they had only added 800 new units in Austin in 2008 to 2009. For to give you guys a little bit of color, in last year they added 60,000 units. So imagine they only added 8,000 units. Yeah, Austin was significantly smaller, yes, but we still had an influx of people moving here at that point. The Austin market, the 360 was probably the only unit, the only condo tower at that point, at that height. Downtown looked drastically different. The mayor at the time was trying to really make a push for the urbanization of Akamutsu, best fish. Very high price. Talk soon, dude. Hope all is well too, man. Thanks for jumping in here. So I think that we are entering into a time now. If you're looking to move or rent in the urban core, I think now is the time to do so. I think over the next 6 months, you're going to see prices jump up drastically. I read another article today, which is a little bit counterintuitive to that, but only because that's in the Austin MSA total, looking at all of Austin. I was talking about downtown, a subsect. If you were ever thinking about living in the downtown market and you wanted to test it out, now would be the time to do so. Same thing with towers, condo towers as well. So the difference between condos versus apartments. But one thing that I read today in the Austin Business Journal was that Austin has the most apartments in the US set to be built over the next year. Um, that look, that's no surprise, right? We still have a lot of people moving to Austin. That doesn't necessarily mean that all these units are being delivered in the urban core. Think about how big the MSA is now, right? We have Liberty Hill, right? Tesla's doing a 1,000-acre site up there. We have Taylor now. Like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I would have never thought about Taylor for anything. All the development happening in Bastrop. So this is the whole MSA and how big it is. If you think about it, it's huge. I mean, shit, it probably feels like the size of New Hampshire. It's probably a little bit smaller. I mean, that's where we grew up, but it's that big of an area, and so they're able to deliver units significantly cheaper because there's more land available, right? And so that will help people as far as kind of going back to urban sprawl. Whereas thinking about the past, I don't know, 20 years in Austin was kind of the past 20 years was with all of our people like me growing up as millennials. We were all about the experience. We weren't thinking about kids at that time. And so that meant that everybody wanted to move to the east side. They wanted to be closer to Austin. They wanted to be right downtown. They wanted to live in the thick of it because that's what we do. We're about experiences. And then we start to have kids and we're like, fuck, this is not great having an 18-month. Oh, this is my experience, only because she's not in here right now. But Denise at one point in time was like, yeah, we got to move. Like Max is 18 months old and like he's like high-fiving the window washer on the 37th floor type thing. It's just like it's not, we're not in New York, dude. Right. And so a lot of times people move out of necessity, stuff like that. So totally get that part of it. And so that's a lot of times that's when people move out of that downtown market or when they move out of the experiential part of their life is to say, okay, we got to think about schools. We have to think about jobs. We have to think about more land, right? If you want to have your kids play in the backyard versus even having a neighborhood where your kids can go play in the street. That's how I grew up and grateful that we're in a neighborhood that we can do that now. And so those are all the things that are important as people kind of mature and they start to kind of go through that experience of starting a family and everything else. They start to look for different areas. And if that's you right now and you're like thinking, oh shit, where should we move? Holler at your boy. We have this real dope map presentation that we do, or have about an hour-long conversation that discusses the things that you enjoy, things that your family enjoys, and then really start to talk about the different areas based on not just my experience, not based on just like growth of Austin, but also be able to connect you with some people that are in those neighborhoods so you can really kind of get like, okay, what is this really about? And then at least, hopefully, these people are vetted by me and they're not assholes. Again, Paul. Again, guys, my name's Paul with 12 Rivers Realty. This is an AMA, so feel free to ask me anything. And again, asking a question real quickly. What's your favorite fish? Mine is a toro. Amberly, who is a dope sushi chef, said akamatsu, which I'm going to have to Google that later. There's a new trend called feral kid summer where kids are playing outside unsupervised. So basically our childhoods. Feral kid summer. Feral kid summer. Can you guys believe that? Can we just call that being a kid? Like where, as I got my Stanley, how the fuck did we get here? You know what I mean? Like where I think I blame the internet. I blame social media, right? I don't know. You guys can tell me what you think of this, but to me, like we are so worried that something's going to happen to our kids because I wonder if the child abduction rate is the same from when we were kids versus not. Shout out to Alicia. Hope all's well. Me and Alicia has found this life hack that we'll talk about later. But the whole feral kid situation, right? Where the kids just go outside and play, that's great at the end of the day, right? It's so great if kids can go ride their bikes and do all this other stuff. We have to let them make mistakes a little bit, right? Within reason, assuming they're not out spray painting cars and stuff like that. But all good. Yep. Feral Kid Summer. Who knew? Who absolutely. Man, I don't know. Let me talk about Alicia real quickly. So, Alicia is a good friend of mine and a advisor at 12 Rivers Realty. And I don't know if y'all know this or not, but there is a program out there where you can actually, if you want to go on vacation, you can essentially like house sit for somebody throughout the world and either get paid to do it or do it for free, which is totally dope. And so, I think if I was a single person and our family, it doesn't even matter if you're single, I guess, at this point, but that sounds like that'd be a lot of fun. Can you imagine doing that in like Thailand or Fiji, or I think she did London? And it's an opportunity for you to one help somebody and help service, but then two, a way to really go experience a neighborhood or a part of the world, which is really dope. So if anybody wants to do that, let me know. What do we got? Some questions coming in here. Trusted house sitters. You're my trusted. Yep. Ah, yep. So apparently there's a town. There's 530 acres. God, that sounds awesome. And London's expensive as fuck, by the way. There's 530 acres in Lockhart, so it's Caldwell County. Which again, like all this information coming out of Lockhart is dope. And a bunch of reasons for that. One, has a lot of land. Lockhart has a lot of land. Two, it's an easy jump in up 183 to get to 130. There's a ton of culture, right? I think it's called First Friday, which is a an event that they do at Lockhart, and you've got coffee shops, has tons of barbecue spots. Maybe one of the birthplaces of barbecue, or at least Central Texas barbecue. And it's really a neat place. If you guys haven't gone to Lockhart and spent a Friday on it, you should definitely go check it out. But man, you're just seeing a lot of stuff coming out of there. There's a 1,500-acre site that has just been announced that's going in for a development there. That's going to be a data center. There's a prototype town that is being announced. That's 530 acres in Lockhart as well. Right now, you can get property in Lockhart, owner occ, zero down, for 260,000, which is crazy. Your monthly payment on that ends up being somewhere around like 1900. And guess what? Like it will rent for at or slightly above what your payment is, right? So if you wanted to buy a property like that and then live in it for a year and then turn it into a rental and buy another one, that's a great way to start homeownership with a minimal amount of money down. Now, if you can work from home, that's great. If it's something where you need to work into downtown, you now have a 25-minute commute, which may or may not be that bad. That's up to you. But I would say smart money is putting its money in Lockhart. And the dope thing is with the way that it's situated within an area that you can do USDA loans, you can actually do 100% down, no MI, which is dope. Let's see. First S, being billed as manufacturing hardware city to what you find in other countries like China. You know, you're seeing a lot of stuff that's coming out right now about manufacturing coming back to the US, which is huge. And that's interesting because you've got one, that new data center that's going down there. But two, this is manufacturing coming back here. But guess what, guys? This isn't manufacturing coming back here for US workers. This is manufacturing coming back here for robots. That's it. This is where this is going. You're going to have people that are going to manage the robots, but this isn't manufacturing like Detroit in the 60s, Detroit in the 50s and 60s. This isn't manufacturing like steel plants in the Rust Belt. This is manufacturing in the way of there's going to be robots on the manufacturing line, and this is going to be the push. And that's what they're trying to do right now because robots will be significantly cheaper than Chinese labor. That's where this is pushing, and that's something that's probably 5 years out. Shout out to Angelos. That is a bar that he dropped on me um, at dinner, and so yeah, that's what's pushing here, guys. We got 4 minutes left. Julia, thanks for jumping in here as always. Guys, this is an AMA, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Trying to think what else we got going on right now. Um, I think I do think that the market has bottomed, and it's starting to feel that way. We're starting to see things on a national level, which basically is that the US market, not the Austin market, but the US market, you're starting to hit that point where you're starting to see either an equilibrium buyer seller's market, or it might even at this point sway into a buyer's market nationally. Here's why this is dope for Austin is because as the Fed and as the federal government starts to make decisions to help out the housing market, because make no mistake, housing is where the majority of the wealth in the United States is. That's it. The majority of our wealth. The thing is, you can't access that wealth if you're going to refi at a rate that's at 6.5%, 7%, especially when people are sitting at rates at 3 to 4%. People won't sell because of that. That's why a lot of people will pull their homes off the market is because they're not ready to sell because they don't have the rates aren't there. As you start to see the housing market start to slow across the board, which is going to happen, um, you will start to see more aggressive rate cuts on the Fed level because that means that the economy is taking a hit. And then you'll start to see what's called quantitative easing, which means that the government will start to put money back into the market versus right now we've got quantitative tightening, and that's why there's been a huge suck of funds coming out of the market right now, and that's why you're seeing things not necessarily transacting as much. Although you're seeing corporate profits significantly higher and bank profits are higher, that's because banks make money on that delta, and when that delta is higher, they make more money. But it actually means that we transact less, and it means that we're not spending as much money for that. Or in this case, because we're a consumer economy, we're putting everything on credit, unfortunately. And so at some point, that's definitely going to catch up to us. Here's why that's good for Austin is because the Austin dynamics and the Texas dynamics in general are such that it's very pro business. And if you have other cities and states that are not as pro business, you're going to see a huge influx of movement to Texas markets and Austin in particular. It's going to be interesting to see if Dallas becomes the belle of the ball. There's just so much land up there and you can deliver it cheaper. Their infrastructure is a lot easier to add to, it's easier to get around. Part of that is because we have to the west, we have an inactive fault line called the Balcones Fault, so you can't just build over that fault, right? And on top of that, we have the Edwards Aquifer, which is a lake that goes for underground lake that goes from Austin all the way down to San Antonio. So we can't just cover that like a parking lot because we need that water to go into the ground through the limestone into the lake and thus into our drinking water, right? So you can't just it's not just that Austin has a bunch of folks that are against pro growth. That's part of it. The other part of it is that we have some geographical constraints with the Texas Hill Country and everything else. You can't just concrete it. Whereas in Dallas and Houston, they're just like pave it up, just go ahead and do what you got to do, which means that you can deliver property in units quicker for less money. And so then if you take the same positive things that are happening in Texas, but then put that with the ability to add product, that makes it a lot easier. And so that's why I think those areas are growing. They're going to be growing quicker than us. Having said that, there's no other city in the world that you can draw 100-mile radius that has more colleges with educated people than Austin, Texas. Think about it. That's it around the world. It wasn't my stat. That was a stat of a friend of mine. And so that's why you're going to see a lot of the tech jobs coming out of Austin because of that in particular. So yeah, I mean, that's my time today, guys. This is Paul Smith with the 12 at 12, but today really at 11. Thanks again for tuning in. If you guys have any questions or if anybody has any questions throughout the week, please feel free to DM me. To all those that are watching on, Twitch, YouTube Shorts, X, all that.